arriving in U.S. mail from St. Louis in the original de Havilland DH-4 biplane and 10 bulky gunny sacks are the combined audiobook renditions and supplemental background information as presented in podcast form by moi, me, Robert P. Fitton. Good evening to one and all, wherever in the galaxy you make your home. Chapter 1, Apex Junction, American Colony 6, Manitoba, British Columbia, July 15th, 2047. Unlimited power can crush. Unlimited power seeks destruction. Unlimited power must be challenged. The national security state did not want Patch Kincaid dead, but in a perverted sense, they wanted the realignment. It was simple. They placed your body in a chilled solution of sodium-inundated water where they could virtually communicate with your brain. Chilled to only 52 degrees Fahrenheit, 11.11111 degrees Celsius, then they could, in a very benign way, supplement whatever they wanted and take care of any security issues for the state. The state was all. The state was before and after. Patch knew the propaganda. The NSS did not kill their enemies or use threats anymore. Guns and missiles had been replaced with realignments. He was a prime target in 2047. John Palakis, chief engineer of the colony, agreed with the NSS. Palakis was tasked with the engineering problems at Apex Junction, but he also tracked and monitored for signs of the retrograde bubble, possibly active at the level of the quantum foam. Patch at times believed that Palakis, once a professor, had secretly worked for the NSS as a rogue agent, but he couldn't prove it. It was possible Palakis might destroy the retrograde bubbles, the passageway to other times and places. Yet the past tugged at Patch like a cyclone, threatening to sweep him back into horrific places he had forgotten and never wanted to see again. At age 37 and happily married, he stood in line at the carnival with his family and his Irish setter Meinkewitz. The warming summer sun, even in the afternoon, had a soothing effect, massaging the struggles of his time-traveling adventures, epitomized by the death of the 35th President of the United States. Periodically, Kennedy's death would emerge from his unconsciousness like the Loch Ness Monster from the deep. This rolling anxiety had its genesis in Dealey Plaza. He could have done more to prevent the president's death. If he had stopped the Kennedy assassination, there would be no NSS. Time left JFK's death in the past, along with his mentor and friend, Ray Meinkewitz, the namesake of his Irish setter. Patch patted Meynkewitz's head. The dog sat and wagged his tail. "There's no food up here, Meinkewitz, just a roller coaster." Meinkewitz barked and Sherry laughed. Maybe the roller coaster simulated his burgeoning anxiety to surface. The real Meinkewitz had spent his life perfecting retrograde and travel through time, only to conclude that human beings had no business changing time. Patch agreed, yet if he could thwart the NSS at any point, he'd do it. The dog pawed his pant leg. "You're not going on the roller coaster, Meinkewitz." He felt Sherry's warm hand on his wrist as his boys, Sam and Johnny, jumped up and down in anticipation of the roller coaster ride. Crow's peaks had begun to develop around Sherry's expressive brown eyes, while Patch had a cluster of bristly gray hairs at the sideburns. 8 years ago, he and Sherry were thrust forward via retrograde from a beach in Galveston, Texas, after the assassination of President Kennedy. They had begun a new life in the residential neighborhood in Apex Junction, American Colony 6, population 3,016. They had good friends. All their kids played together and went to school with traditional American values taught in the classroom. All that was more than he had ever imagined. The NSS was like broken glass in his shoe. He could enjoy his life and his family and love his wife, but the wound would never go away. "Patchy, why do you and the kids go wild for roller coasters?" asked Sherry, elbowing his side. "You know how I feel about flying, sweetness," said Patch. "I miss it. If I could get in a jet right now, I would." "And now you've got the boys ready to enter the wild blue yonder." "Good. You can stay on the ground and teach school." She twisted her mouth around. I would be delighted. Pelekas bounced along the line in an open-collared Oxford shirt and baggy slacks, and his scruffy gray, dirty blonde hair twisted with the wind near the steep roller coaster. He and Patch had become distinct enemies over 8 years. Patch even defeated him in a councilman race in their district. They clashed on everything because Pelekas blamed Patch and his cohorts for the possibility of the retrograde bubble encircling the colony because of the original time travel experiments at Hastings Mountains in Colorado. In the past years, he was convinced that Patch was involved in the plot to kill President Kennedy. He had to be NSS. Kincaid. His eyes were creepy, as if a maniacal force floated inside, and his smile hung across his chubby face. Who did I kill now, John? Quick Gus caught Pelekas' scattered, unkempt hair, but he never straightened it. We need to talk, he said in a scrappy voice. I'm done talking with you, got it? Said Patch. I unfortunately need your help, he said through a clamped jaw. Patch always worried about Pelekas' connection to the NSS. What's the matter? You gonna bring me up the mountain again? You can check those scanners yourself, you and your NSS cohorts. You see a conspiracy in everything, Kincaid. Don't start on this retrograde bubble stuff again, John, said Sherry. Of course it's the retrograde bubble, said Pelekas. Why does it still vibrate? Patch placed his hand on Sam and Johnny's shoulders. That's impossible, John, and you know it. Retrograde lost all its energy output 4 years ago. I know. I did the adjustments at the Apex monitoring station. Okay, in our dimension. You of all people should know about other dimensions. Oh, come on, John. You're telling us that the bubbles still exist? He and Sherry faced each other and laughed. There's been static on all our communications for months, said Pelekas. The retrograde's energy has been slowly leaking into our world, Kincaid. Come on, Dad, said Sam as Patch had fallen back in the line. 1 second, Sam, he said as Sherry tugged him forward. What the hell does this mean, John? It means that bubble could very well resume its original configuration. You don't know that, said Sherry. Patch sensed a grinding in his gut. It was a feeling from the past when everyone was after him. I'll meet you at monitoring station 5, John. I'll boot up the data. Patch nodded and held Sam and Johnny's hands up the ramp to the roller coaster. Sherry's eyes locked with his. Her arms were tightly folded across her chest. Then his eyes swung down the midway as the chunky Pelekas, shaking his head, stomped toward the amusement park exit. Patch turned to Sherry. He's a threat. All the Apex monitoring stations reminded him of Hastings Mountain in the other timeline. Apex did not have rows of computers or a worldwide map, but the station along the mountains did have a few monitoring areas that specifically monitored dimensional energy movement on a horizontal screen up front, and the quantum computers were superior to Meintkewitz's 20th century counterparts. With a scant smile, he walked into the rear offices. The heaters had not yet warmed the air. He missed his buddy, Uncle Ray. Pelekas sat in front of 2 monitors. Patch leaned forward toward the blue screen, laced with a jagged, red emergence into this dimension. That's not good, said Pelekas, straightening up and panning the area. Eventually it will be measurable. Happy now? Knock it off, John. Well, you're happy? All those trips into the past and multiple timelines, flirting with other dimensions. Look what you did! You got Kennedy killed! That's enough, roared Patch as he grabbed Pelekas by his lapels. Pelekas had the type of face that made Patch want to smash him hard. Look, you ignorant bastard, I suggest that you concentrate on fixing this damn problem. Just like that, with no power output. I, for one, am going to reason this through. The smallest possible size for anything in our universe is the Planck length, around 1/1000th of a billionth of a billionth of a billionth of a centimeter across. So the bubble is still in the quantum foam, said Patch in a loud voice. That's the problem, Kincaid. You know the power of the quantum foam. Dr. Alexander Moon, before he went mad and understood all this, said Patch, he maintained that the power contained within 1 cubic centimeter of empty space would be enough to boil all the Earth's oceans. And you are going to stop the leakage? You and your arrogant ego? Patch let him rant and sidestepped to the next monitor with the power readings expressed in digits representing unfathomable power. This is what Ray simply put in single digits in the 60s of the 20th century. I think I hate Meinkewitz more than I hate you. He was in charge. Patch continued to ignore him. If we express this in single digits on a scale of 10, we've had a 2.5 gain. Moon early on demonstrated the bubbles evidence two important things. Retrograde bubbles retreat to the point of origin and bubbles are absorbed into the quantum foam. Then why do we have a bubble? I don't know. You never do. Neither Moon nor Ray had the equipment we have now. We have to use the captivating antenna again. Oh, great, replied Palakas, throwing up his hands. Patch kept his back to Palakas. Hey, John, if you don't like it, then just leave and go to your precious NSS. I have a wife. She has my condolences. Always with the mouth, Kincaid. If the bubble fully emerges. Chapter 2, Apex Junction, American Colony 6, Colony Middle School, Manitoba, British Columbia, August 29th, 2047. The air was clear and fresh, with fall not too far away. Patch placed his hand into Sherry's smaller hand as both boys in blue tank tops ran against each other in the relay races. Meinkewitz barked. The sunlight in her hair enhanced her features. All around, the hundreds of kids, each with a number on their shirts, competed in numerous games, a yearly tradition at Apex Junction. Sam won his portion of the race only because he was a year and a half older. Both Sherry and Patch clapped and shouted for both boys. He caught sight of the mountains backdrop to the race. Ever since Palakas had shown him the leaking retrograde bubble on the monitors over a month ago, he had stayed away from the Apex monitoring station. Stopping the leak of a retrograde bubble from the underlying quantum foam of the universe was impossible. Out of sight, out of mind. The less Patch saw of the unruly Palakas, the better. I think Johnny will eventually overtake Sammy. She nudged Patch, still fixated on the mountains. Patch, we have no control over this, do we? Patch's head snapped toward her. Let's just say the whole colony gets back in time. What's the plan? What's the plan? Find Meinkewitz back in time, I guess. The dog barked and Patch turned toward the setter. Not you, your father, Ray Meinkewitz. Scary scenario, she said, hugging him. Patch looked back to the games. Hopefully it will never happen. If I were back there, said Sherry, I'd want to know about the High Cabal, whoever set the Kennedy assassination in motion. Even now, we don't know who did it. They didn't leave memos saying how they planned JFK's murder. She looped her arm under his as the boys prepared for the sprint on the next track. Patch, there's no taking on this High Cabal. Look what happened to the United States. Everyone on Odyssey Ave gathered around Patch and Sherry's extended wood table in the vaulted dining room. Kids were loud, and the adults engaged in a crossfire of conversation. Meinkewitz spread his paws on the braided rug. The Apex coordinator of this year, Joe Tupelo, a tall man in his 40s with thinning hair, repeatedly said he'd make no promises for the colony demands, but always addressed concerns. The competent Tupelo won in a landslide last April. You're a typical politician, Joe, said Patch, holding a beer stein from across the table. Politician? Shouted Joe. I'm a concrete guy. Roads and buildings, walls, trenches. Oh, listen to him, Sherry. You'd think he built the colony himself. Well, see, said Tupelo. Sherry gets it. Sam approached them. He opened his blue eyes wide before he spoke in a high tone. Can we go outside now? You don't want dessert? Neapolitan ice cream? She said. Never mind, he said, scampering back to his chair next to the longer-haired Johnny. Patch leaned back and laughed. Then he sipped the dark ale. But as he lowered the glass, John Palakis appeared in the foyer. Oh, said Patch. Meinkewitz perked up and produced a deep growl. Try knocking next time, John. Palakis kept pushing his fingers through his scattered hair. Patch tightened his brow and stood. Excuse me. You're excused, Patchy, said Sherry, poking his side. What do you want, John? Asked Patch. Palakis looked as if he were waiting the ignition of a nuclear bomb. We got problems, Kincaid. What problems? Not here, he said, motioning Patch outside. Out on the front stoop. What the hell, said Patch, opening the door. They stood in the nighttime air. The rise to the mountaintop, housing the Apex Station's capture antenna and colony scan buildings, came into view. Twinkling stars swept across the summer sky. We're going to have to activate the capture antenna because the bubble is expanding in this goddamn dimension. The readings mean nothing if we don't focus that bubble back into the foam. It's that simple. There's no diverting it, Kincaid. Let me get a coffee mug. The problem with you, Palakis, is you assume too much. You heard from Patch? Asked the hefty Janet Wachowski after she removed her apron and walked from the kitchen. Meinkewitz waited at the wood door. I haven't. John and Patch hate each other. Everyone knows he blames Patch for the time bubble. Patch went back in time and things happened. To accuse him after the fact is nuts. Do you ever miss your old time period, Sherry? Asked Janet. Miss my parents. I miss the good old United States when we had freedom. Of course. It's a new life here with everyone, and we have the boys, and I have Patch. Can't complain. I only wish we had saved President Kennedy. Kennedy pushed against the forces to be, right? He did, said Sherry. They've been gone 6 hours. Aren't you worried about him? Sherry put her hand on Janet's shoulder. I've been with Patch too long not to expect the unexpected. What about Ellie Palakis? Asked Janet. She's not a fan of Patch either, said Sherry, chuckling. She's Palakis' wife. I've tried to be friendly with her. She and Palakis both enjoy being crotchety. It's their life's professions. If you need anything, call me. I will. See you tomorrow, Janet. When Janet shut the door and was outside, both boys called out looking for Patch. She told them straight. Their father was at work real late. When they were settled in bed, she opened up a communication to the scanner buildings. Not because of anything definitive, she just had a feeling that something was wrong. Maybe a problem between Patch and Palakis. It was 9:30 at night and she didn't get an answer. She spoke into her microwave phone. Oh, Patchy, the boys are wondering where their daddy is, and so is your wife. Give me an update. Meinkewitz looked up at her. He'll be back, Meinkewitz. She changed into her nightclothes and lay down in front of the screen. That occupied her mind for the better part of an hour. Then she called Palakis on his line. Nothing. At 5 past midnight, she sat up. She fixated on the clock's blue digits, as if that would change the time. She connected to Joe Tupelo. Tupelo was groggy for a few moments and then realized Sherry was calling. Sherry, what's wrong? Joe, Patch isn't back from the Apex and I can't reach Palakis. God, it's after midnight. Listen, let me call the night watch and we'll head up to the Apex. I'm going with you. With Janet watching the boys, Sherry and Meinkewitz boarded a terrain vehicle with 3 commandos and Joe Tupelo in a crimson sweatsuit. Sherry looped her arm around Meinkewitz and had a tightness in her gut. The bright rim lights dimmed the starry sky, and then the vehicle crossed over the bump onto the rim itself. The retrograde bubble monitors and the perimeter scanners for the colony were centered in several long buildings under the rising antennas. Palakis' vehicle was centered between the buildings. Well, that's very odd, said Tupelo. Damn, this doesn't look good, said Sherry as the vehicle slowed. The lieutenant stepped forward. We need to sweep these buildings before we can lay out of the vehicles, Mr. Tupelo. I understand, said Tupelo. We'll try and communicate with Captain Kincaid and John Palakas. Tupelo nodded, and the soldiers, weapons across their chest, ran into the first building. Sherry called Janet back at the house. Security just entered the buildings, Janet. What are they telling you? She asked. Trying to figure this out. They would have alerted us if somebody were trying to get into the colony. They didn't fight, did they? I don't know. The other possibility is that they're in the station just studying the outlines of the bubble. No, Jan. The other possibility is they may have gotten entangled within the bubble. Sherry took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and bowed her head. Getting caught in the bubble would not guarantee the Patch would land in another time and place. It would guarantee nothing. He could be trapped within the bubble. She held on to the dog. I pray they're out there somewhere investigating. The boys are asleep. Sherry nodded and tried not to fall apart. I understand. The vehicle communicator sounded and Sherry pushed the red button. Sherry here. Jerry, it's Joe. The station appears empty. They were here and the computers are on. There's an old Air Force mug half filled with warm coffee on the counter. Patch's mug. What happened, Joe? We don't have a video, but we have readings. Peter's running the program backward. What the hell happened? Jerry, the retrograde bubble is now focused. It's surrounding Apex Junction, said Tupelo slowly. She closed her eyes and fought the tears. God, I knew it. If they were taken into the retrograde, it'll show up by the added weight. Computers are supposed to prevent that and focus the prodigious energy. Chapter 3, Galveston Island, Texas, December 1966. Vietnam combat deaths, December 1966, 385. A warm, salty breeze swept in across the ocean breakers. Patch squinted in the midday sun. He kicked the sand into the wind currents. Leaving Sherry and the boys at the other end of a dimensional warp that was supposed to have dissipated was the worst that could happen. From behind, Palakas' gyrating voice mixed with the breakers and the wind like a drink fouled up with a combination of sweet liqueurs. The hefty Apex engineer approached from a few hundred feet down the beach. You all right, John? Where the hell are we now, Kincaid? He asked, slipping and sliding in the sand as he neared Patch. I was following a secondary energy wave, very small. Now I'm somewhere else because of you. Shut up. Patch pressed his lips and thought of the time with Sherry on this very beach. We're on Galveston Beach in Texas. I just don't know when. Wonderful. We're trapped back in time. There are furrows in any retrograde wave. We got sucked into that bubble. Why? Palakas croaked. His furrowed hair and bulging eyes gave him a ghoulish appearance. The entire unfortunate predicament became Patch's worst nightmare. Nothing we tracked indicated you and I were encapsulated by the retrograde at Apex Junction, Kincaid. Like I want to be here, he said, turning around. Who knows what year this is? We're back in the time where you killed Kennedy. Patch took one step forward and sent his left fist into Palakas' jaw. The larger Palakas flipped back and landed in the sand. A few seconds later, he staggered to his feet. You keep that mouth of yours shut, John, or I'll whack you again. We're at the mercy of those energy fluctuations with no means to sustain ourselves. Patch stared at Palakas and hoped the pudgy man would advance on him again. Then he trotted down the beach toward rows of summer cottages, kicking the sand and fumed about being stuck in time. The waves mesmerized him as he briefly thought about those who had gotten away with killing John F. Kennedy. And Palakas was all wrong about surviving here. All that money from Roselli's operation spying on Oswald, depending on what year they landed, would be in the Southern Resources Bank system, unless Roselli scoffed it up. Patch folded his arms over his chest as he faced Palakas. They walked in silence for a few minutes back to the beach grass. Leaving Sherry and the boys behind was inconceivable. Patch stopped on the edge of the beach berm near a parking lot with no cars. He stroked his chin. I need to find Ray Meinkewitz. He was at Barton College. Barton? But who knows where he is now? They crossed the parking lot as a red Chevy Supersport raced down the beach road. What year? 65 Chevy. Good. What do you mean, good? Snapped Palakas as they reached the road. Shut up. Patch saw the hotel across the street where he and Sherry had seen David Ferry after the assassination of President Kennedy. How much did Ferry and the others know about the plot against the president? He stared at the parking lot for a few seconds, tightened his face, and followed Palakas toward the yellow hotel with the pink neon vacancy sign still glowing. Palakas entered the motel while Patch thought. Where was Roselli and Harvey, as well as the exiles and all those associated with the mob? A few seconds later, Palakas pushed open the glass door. What's a Polaroid? It's an instant chemical picture, said Patch. What's the date? The Christmas decorations are still up. Today is December 27th, 1966. 3 years after Kennedy's death. Patch removed his worn wallet. He thumbed through the photos until he reached a wrinkled typewritten card for the Southern Resources Bank. He also had a license from 1963 and a Social Security card. Then he pulled out 5 $100 bills. You had this planned, Kincaid. Oh, sure, I wanted to leave Sherry and the kids. If you haven't got something good to say, then don't say anything at all, John. Patch looked back to the beach as if Sherry and the boys would be there. That bubble was smaller than small, wrapped tightly in a subdimension through time, and that road could open up any time and swallow them back to parts unknown, or it could disappear into the foam. He counted on his hand as he spoke. We find a hotel, and then the nearest bank. Then we get transportation. Hopefully by that time I will have contacted Ray Meinkewitz. Bank? I have money back here. You and your time traveling, changing everything. Then I'll call Roselli. He denied knowing me when I called from Dallas on the day Kennedy was killed. I'm not so sure I should call him. Maybe he's just covering his own tail. I may call somebody who can contact him. I know people in Vegas and New Orleans. Aha! The guy who screwed up Kennedy's death is at it again, said Palakas. Patch grabbed Palakas and yanked at his lapels. He fought his anger at being ripped to 1966 and pushed Palakas back. Then he crossed the lot toward the road. You can come with me, John, or you can go off on your own. I don't care. Patch, at the corner of the motel canopy, no longer saw Palakas. He walked forward and around the corner. At the top of the hill where the grass turned to sand, he surveyed the beach and the waves touching the shore. A slight cooling breeze whipped the sand upward. John! Where are you, John? About 100 yards along the shore, Palakas stumbled down Galveston Beach. Patch shook his head. Palakas had made his choice and was on his own. Patch stood on the Holiday Inn's balcony overlooking Houston's 4 or 5 skyscrapers and the looping freeway sweeping by the city. He had left a succinct message for Louis McWillie in Las Vegas at the Thunderbird. Reluctantly, he included the Holiday Inn's main number. Patch thought about being armed should somebody come after him. By bus, he had traveled to the bank and alerted the bank he'd be purchasing a car. The account had over $300,000 with interest in 1966 dollars. John Cooley, the bank president, a man with receding black hair, had his secretary update Patch's banking card, and Patch tucked Cooley's business card in his shirt pocket. He thought about Barton College, but was afraid the call would be traced. Johnny Roselli, no matter what his responsibility in the assassination, was the only one who had the means to find Meinkewitz. Before dark, Patch sunk his teeth into a juicy and quite tasty 39-cent Whopper from Burger King. Then he ordered a second 4 ounces of beef. Palakas' sudden departure hung over him. Later, he located a Chevy dealer along the main boulevard and decided to negotiate while he was fresh and Cooley was at the bank. He liked the blue Chevy Nova with the 327 engine. Late that night, he threw himself on the motel bed. He spread out his arms, and the motel room spun from increasing fatigue, and the strain of being captured by the retrograde energy at the apex antenna left him with spent emotion. Back in this time period, powerful and violent men from the CIA, Army intelligence, the anti-Castro people, and members of La Costa Nostra would kill him in a second after his involvement in trying to stop President Kennedy's murder. He was fascinated by the black and white portable TV on the motel dresser and repeatedly turned the channel as he drifted off. The next thing he remembered was the phone ringing and the orange glow of the clock radio passing 2 a.m. "Hello, Mr. McWillie." After a while, there was a long silence.
"That's Kincaid."
"Exactly right."
"What do you want?"
"Mr. McWillie, I need to talk privately to Johnny."
"Oh, you do you?"
"It's important," said Patch.
"It always is. I can tell you this, I'll make the phone call. Let Johnny decide if he wants to talk to you."
The line clicked and Patch went on hold. He pinched the bridge of his nose, and thoughts of being back with his family just a day ago in real time gripped him like a straitjacket. He became aware of his own breathing and wanted to sleep. Then McWillie came back on the line.
"Johnny respects you, Patch, and your girlfriend. Is she with you?"
"No, sir."
"Okay. Now listen to me. They got the FBI all over Johnny, constantly following him. Johnny wants to talk. He may have a job for you."
Patch did not want to put his life on the line again for Roselli.
"You need to be in L.A. on New Year's Day. Be at the old Warner Brothers building on KTLA, the TV station. When you arrive, you ask for Mr. Day."
"Got it."
"Who's with you?"
"I'm alone."
"They have a teenage TV show they're broadcasting from KTLA. Johnny will be out of sight near the bleachers in that studio. With all the rock and roll going on, you should have time to talk. Keep this to yourself, Patch. Be there at 1 o'clock.
"Thank you, Mr. McWillie. I'll be there." The line clicked. Patch walked to the window curtain and pulled it back as he spoke to himself. "I have an appointment with Roselli. He's being trailed by the FBI. What else is new?" Chapter 4. KTLA, 5800 Sunset Boulevard, Hollywood, California, January 1st, 1967. Vietnam combat deaths, January 1967, 470. Patch spent New Year's Eve steering the Nova along the darkened old Route 66, the headlights following the winding asphalt highway through the looming Arizona hills to the Colorado River into Needles, California. He had used a foldable paper map of the American Southwest under the overhead light for navigation, and had listened to AM stations out of Phoenix and Albuquerque. The station, KHJ in Los Angeles, announced the Rose Parade would take place tomorrow on New Year's Day in Pasadena, and Purdue would play Southern California in the Rose Bowl. The Nova had tremendous power, and gas was only 33 cents a gallon. Arriving in the Southland, he slept for a few hours in a motel off the freeway in Victorville above Cajon Pass. But on New Year's Day, he left early and raced down the wide freeway toward Los Angeles, with the San Gabriel Mountains towering above the freeway to the north. The Los Angeles basin spread south as he peered out the open driver's side window. Near noon, he wondered what the wily Roselli had in mind as he chomped on hamburgers at a restaurant called Carl's Jr. He cautioned himself not to get taken in by Roselli and simply focus on finding Meinkewitz. Would retrograde pull him back to Apex Junction or maybe somewhere else? Perhaps he'd be trapped in real time. Just after 2:30, after driving around Hollywood and the Sunset Strip, Patch veered out of traffic and into the full parking lot under KTLA's lofty gold antenna atop the building. The station helicopter ascended from the rear of the parking lot and zoomed above the city. He sat in the Nova for several minutes until the interior warmed. Seeing Roselli was risky. Once he was inside the cooler studio, he asked the receptionist for Mr. Day. The inner part of the station was darker as the infamous Mr. Day, no more than 20 years old with long blonde hair, escorted him to the studio, housing the teenage program called Shebang. Day asked Patch to sit on one of the bleacher seats to the right. Patch's eyes slowly adjusted to the lower light. A long orange-red firecracker banner with the word Shebang hung above a dance floor, but no one had yet arrived for the show. Several monitors were lined up above the stage, and humongous television cameras were positioned for the broadcast. The misgivings about Roselli tore at his gut, and he reminded himself, almost in a mantra, that Roselli would get him to Meinkewitz. All the technology was old and bulky as a few technicians walked on the set. Roselli, in a dark blazer and open dress shirt, appeared above and behind him in the bleachers with another man in a hat and oversized coat. Patch remembered him as Walter the Knife. Walter the Knife moved down toward the two men. He outstretched his hand to Patch. The accent brought a smile to Patch's face. "How have you been, Patch?" Patch remembered to address him as Mr. Piscotti. "Fine, Mr. Piscotti." Walter the Knife nodded. "Did you marry that girl you had at the racetrack with you?" "Yes, sir. We have boys 8 and 6. "Good. Don't you let her go." Walter seemed confused about the age of the boys, and Patch experienced waves of sadness being away from them. "Come on, Johnny, we'll see you now." Stepping along the bleachers in the low light was a chore. He reached the silver-haired Roselli. Roselli shook Patch's hand and gave him a full smile. The overwhelming King's Men cologne hung in the air. What was it with Roselli and puffing himself up with his cologne? Patch tried not to wince. Still shaking his hand, Roselli slapped Patch's shoulder with his other hand. "You're a smart boy, Patch, laying low after Dallas." "You gotta marry John." Roselli glanced at Walter the Knife. "I'm happy for you, Patch. Your girl showed grit, I remember that. And you did what you were supposed to do. I have to tell you, Patch, this Kennedy thing is still way too hot. You need to stay out of it, my friend." "Mr. Roselli, I'm not looking to get involved with the Kennedy assassination." "Good. Because there's a DA down in New Orleans sticking his nose into this, right, Walter?" "This is the guy. Yes, Stronzo." "You know what they'll do to him, Patch?" said Roselli, pointing at Patch. "His name is Garrison, Jim Garrison, and they'll throw everything at him till they get him to back off." "I understand." Patch nodded as he recalled what Meinkewitz had said in his letter of the future. JFK would not have died if Roselli and his buddy Harvey of the CIA were murdered by Carlos Sanchez as they were supposed to be off the Florida coast. Roselli was in the heart of the conspiracy, but Patch had no way to prove it, nor did he particularly want to. Down in front, some of the teenagers had arrived on the dance floor. "I need to find Meinkewitz," said Patch. Roselli gawked at him long enough to make him nervous. "Patch, you must know that they've been after you for the past 3 years. Meinkewitz worked for the intelligence crowd. They want him dead, too. Why do you need to see Meinkewitz?" Patch did not have a ready answer, but Roselli bailed him out. "The last I heard, and this was a year ago, Meinkewitz was on the run." "Not good." "It's never been good to be on the run unless you're protected." "I'll help you, Patch. You put your ass on the line for me more than once and saved our lives. I have to be careful because the FBI is all over me. They want me deported. Every phone call, every fucking place I go. I have to ask people to make calls for me on other lines." "Why?" asked Patch. "Stronzi," said Walter the Knife. "Ah," said Patch. Whatever Stronzi meant must have been bad. Things were beginning to buzz in the studio. Below, a sharp man with perfectly trimmed black hair and tight sideburns, his quick-talking voice not quite audible from the bleachers, bounced around the dance floor talking to the kids who were ready to dance. Boys wore neckties and sports coats, and the girls' dresses were just above the knee. "Listen, my friend, I can get the Meinkewitz information from third and fourth parties. Just leave me out of the Kennedy thing. You never saw me." "Yes, sir," he said as Roselli started again. "You look older, Patch. Every time I see you, you look older." "Well, I am older," said Patch, and the three men laughed. "I want you to drive up to the Friars Club at 9900 Santa Monica Boulevard in Beverly Hills, but park away from the building. You'll get through the side entrance. Tell them your name is Willie. That's how I get my friends in. It's a private club. While you wait for your answer about Professor Meinkewitz, I want you to watch the high rollers. I need to know the name of anyone of the card players who keep looking up at the ceiling. Harry, an older man in a black tux, is your contact. You'll get a call and Harry will hand you the house phone. Just say yes or no to my question about the card players. It's a little safer than watching Oswald. Roselli evidenced a smile. Oswald is long dead and the feds are watching the Friars Club. Just don't be obvious. If anyone asks you about what was going on when we were trying to kill Castro, just clam up. I know you can keep your mouth shut, Patch. And Morales, you know who he is. Yes, sir. Morales doesn't want to get nailed for authorizing logistical support in Dallas. You know, he'd kill you before your hat hit the ground. I think he's in Vietnam kicking ass over there. Roselli pointed his finger again. And Rip Robinson. He was everywhere 3 years ago. Just pretend you never heard of any of them. You understand what I'm talking about? I do. One more thing, because Garrison is stirring things up. Stay low, Patch. He's being taken care of by the big boys. I'm not surprised by that. And if they ask you about Jenkins or Quintero, just deny it. I never met Jenkins. Quintero I saw from a distance. You never heard of them? Or programs like AM/World? You may not see me for a while. You don't need to alert the feds as to your whereabouts. That way they can't ask you any questions, Patch, because I never saw you today. But I think they have the intel boys listening in on other lines. That's why someone else will call you at the Friars Club and give you the Meinkewitz information. Understood. The rock music started and the crowd began dancing. The bright camera lights shined across the dance floor and a young guy in a dark blazer held a microphone. His name was Casey Kasem. His voice clear and crisp, and they started the show.
For the next 60 minutes, we hope you'll join us on Channel 5 in color for the Sunday edition of
Shebang! Yelled the crowd. I heard them practice before you got here, Patch. It's rock and roll, but I heard the lead singer likes listening to Sinatra. Can you beat that? Asked Walter the Knife. The band was set up on the rear stage with the lead guitar player in front of light-colored lattice panels. The keyboard player was in position on the left of the drummer, and the lead singer, with a magnificent crop of dark hair, held a microphone atop a tall stand. The place lit up with everyone screaming, "I'll take Sinatra, period," said Roselli. The young MC, microphone still in hand, revved up the crowd.
They're gonna do a song called Break On Through. They are the Doors.
The lead guitarist with frizzy hair ignited the song, and the lead singer had a powerful, booming voice. That's Jim Morrison. He's just a kid. Break on through to the other side, said Patch, thinking about his own breaking through time. Right, said Roselli, looking annoyed. He shook Patch's hand. I can't call you young man anymore, but I can tell you I respect you, Patch. You were smart to contact McWillie first. I'll get you the information to find Meinkewitz right away. And you let me know what I want to know at the Friars. Then he moved uncomfortably close. Listen to me. Next time you contact Moynihan, not McWillie. He'll find me. You'll hear from my contact, and call me John. Thank you, John. Roselli signaled to Walter the Knife. Walter the Knife pointed at Patch, and the two men moved away from Patch and along the upper bleachers and into the darkness. Patch turned back to the show. He had listened to the Doors' music, but was not a part of the cult the band would become. As he took in their performance, Patch sensed the music was markedly different. He liked it. Morrison's deep nasal tones and lyrics were unique. When the group finished, the kids on the dance floor cheered and the announcer came back on the speakers. Then the Shebang song started up.
Shebang is produced by Golden West Broadcasters, live on videotape from Hollywood.
The song began again.
You want a smile on your face? You've come to the right place. Shebang!
Smiling, Patch headed for the exit before the crowd, and as he passed one of the stagehands, he raised his hand up into the air and called out, Shebang! The Friars Club, 9900 Santa Monica Boulevard, Beverly Hills, California. For the fourth time in his life, Patch Kincaid felt the pressure of being back in time. Roselli's instructions were explicit. Patch sat in air-conditioned comfort for hours at a table in a darkened corner of the Friars Club as the gin rummy card games continued. No one looked upward along the wall. Patch had surmised that someone was above monitoring the cards and relaying the information below. One thing about Roselli was that if he did something for you, he got back something in return. As much as Patch admired his courage in the past, handsome Johnny cheating people out of money was not the actions of a man with a sterling character. But that was irrelevant. All Patch needed was a location from Meinkewitz. Around 6 p.m., a teenage boy appeared, accompanied by an older man with dyed hair and a black tuxedo. The man in the tux stayed back as the kid handed Patch a manila envelope. Patch tipped the kid. Then he opened the envelope. It was empty. The man in the tux held up the house phone and pointed at Patch. Patch nodded and circled around the table. The older man handed the phone to Patch. "Thank you, Harry,"
Yes or no?
said a female voice he knew was from a payphone because he heard the street traffic. He figured because of the FBI taps, Roselli did not want a chance being on the line. During the time Patch was at the Friars Club, he had seen no one looking upward along the wall. "No." Then she spoke slowly and clearly.
The Beckman Auditorium, Caltech, Pasadena. Tomorrow, 8 a.m. Harold Salisbury.
Then she hung up. Patch handed the phone back to Harry. "Appreciate it, Harry." Harry replied by moving his mouth up to one side so the crow's peaks formed. Patch exited the building onto Santa Monica Boulevard. Cars rumbled by. As he looked both ways down the sidewalk, he assumed the intelligence agencies would be after him soon. He had to find Meinkewitz and find him fast. His heart pounded as he drove the Nova faster than he should have to a nearby two-story turquoise and white Skyways hotel, where he had dinner and then sat by the pool surrounded by old ladies and thin martini glasses. The oogling made him more nervous. Around 6 p.m., he unlocked the room 6210 and went inside. He vowed to take action to find Meinkewitz once he talked to this Salisbury character. On the bed was a satin pillow and a .38 revolver. He lifted the gun and checked the fully loaded chamber. Patch again sensed the King's Men cologne. Under the pillow was Roselli's card. On the flip side of the card, Jim Morrison had signed his name. Patch's face lit up. "Thank you, John." His mind was clearer in the morning. 4:07 a.m., with a donut in hand and a coffee cup in the open glove compartment, he merged onto a narrow, older freeway toward Pasadena. The darker mountains loomed overhead. He finished the coffee when he arrived at the college parking lot 20 minutes later. With the .38 tucked in his belt, he walked slowly across campus at that early hour, his heart beating swiftly. Before he entered the round building with thin columns and rimmed porthole openings to the azure sky, he stopped. Who would be in the shadows when Harold Salisbury, or whoever he was, appeared? The Beckman Auditorium, Caltech, Pasadena, California. The empty auditorium had 2 levels. Patch, always wanted to gain the higher ground, climbed the balcony stairs. He took a seat midway down and panned the seats below and the stage. His Pathfinder analog watch approached 8 a.m. The adrenaline fueled his pounding heart. He wiped the sweat from his brow and twisted in the seat so he could see the rear doors and the lower area. For 15 minutes he waited. Everything over the past few days whipped through his mind like a runaway tornado. A man in white chinos and an open blue shirt stepped from behind the stage curtain. He wore black-rimmed glasses and had dark hair. His voice echoed around the hall. "Mr. Kincaid!" Patch stood up quickly and said nothing. It was not as if he didn't trust this man as much as he had no proof of his identity. He looked for a gun, but the man appeared to be unarmed, nor were there additional people outside. But he knew how the intel guys worked. Maybe this man was legitimate, maybe not. Patch prepared for a confrontation. "How do you know my name?" "I was told your name." The man, taller than he had appeared from a distance, had a weathered face and adjusted his glasses. "Don't worry, I wish you no harm." "Who are you?" Again the quick smile, but this time accompanied by a laugh. "My name is Harold Salisbury. I've been working since January of '64. I've been a full professor of electrical engineering here at Caltech." "You have an ID?" Salisbury reached for his wallet and Patch slid his hand on the gun. Salisbury produced a picture ID in black and white that might or might have not been valid. "Who told you to meet me here?" Salisbury raised his bushy brows, baffled that Patch would ask such a question. "A contact, that's all I can tell you." Patch assumed Roselli's request about Meinkewitz had been quickly filtered through channels. "Then the FBI knows about me." "I have no idea." "Who alerted you to my identity?" "My job is to give you access to a certain party who can find this man Meinkewitz. I don't know him, I don't know where he is." Patch pulled his finely pressed cotton shirt. "Listen, Salisbury, I'm in no mood for any bullshit. Do you know where Ray is located or not?" Salisbury waited until Patch removed his hand. Strangely, he did not seem rattled. "I told you. I will get you to a contact. It won't take long. You have a vehicle?" "I do." "Drive to the top of Mount Wilson." "Mount Wilson? Are you crazy?" "You want my help or not?" Patch shook his head. Okay. Wait outside the observatory trail for Elton Maddock." "Who the hell is Elton Maddock?" asked Patch. "I don't know. That's what I was told." "So in essence, you're screening me and then directing me. If anything happens to me, Salisbury, or whoever you are, if I'm still alive," he said, taking out his gun, "so help me, I'll come back." Chapter 5. Mount Wilson Road, La Cañada, California, January 2nd, 1967. Dealing with Salisbury and the confluence of events had been like dealing with the devil in a chess match. Patch still considered the professor one of those duplicitous, double-dealing CIA types he had met in the early 60s, and Palaikis was on the loose. But having Palaikis gone was also a good thing. Roselli was a different type of problem. Tagging him as a close friend was always a fair-weather proposition. Patch had no choice other than shifting the Nova into second gear up the narrow road in the San Gabriel Mountains. He listened to Jimmy Ruffin singing "I've Passed This Way Before" on KHJ out of Los Angeles. Gripping the steering wheel, he smiled at the song title. With no guardrail in many sections, he could drive or be run off the road down the deadly mountain slope. His handgun, bullets in the chamber, lay on the bench seat. He did not trust Salisbury. The so-called professor could be one of those intel cutouts or perhaps a contract player. It would be just like these clowns to monitor Roselli and then set Patch up. As he drove along the ledge, Patch also reasoned that Salisbury just might have been telling the truth. If they were going to take him into custody, Salisbury simply would have called in security by now. He rolled into a small parking area and ensconced under pines behind a spherical white observatory. Patch stepped out into the cooler mountain air. He lifted the gun off the seat and tucked it behind his belt. Then he flipped down his sunglasses he had bought in the city. At the top of the side trail, the Los Angeles basin was shrouded in a mixture of smog and haze, like an unwashed, dirty window in glaring sunshine. A sputtering wind lifted the sand along the trail, along with a semblance of the ozone's unvarnished odor rising from the basin. Patch turned back to the observatory when he heard voices. A middle-aged man with trim peppered hair that fluttered in the wind gust walked down a concrete stairway accompanied by an attractive brunette in her 20s with thin, black-rimmed glasses. Slender, she wore a lightweight coat, blue skirt, and walked with a quick snap in her step. The man's blue blazer, open-collared shirt, and his cuffed khakis gave him a casual appearance, but his wide shoulders and arched back resembled a retired football player. Patch tracked them as they both climbed the trail. The man extended his hand before he reached Patch. "I'm Elton Maddock. This is Miss Tompkins." "Patch Kincaid." Patch doubted Maddock had given his real name. "Nice to meet you, Patch," said Tompkins, enunciating her words. This tall woman had animated eyes and a sprightly voice as if she were from the Midwest. Her deep brown hair was pinned up. Maddock had a New England accent. "Are you okay?" "Yeah," said Patch. Patch looked around, but only saw his own vehicle. "Amazing. Where have you been, Patch?" she asked, keeping eye contact. Patch was not quite sure about this woman. "Here, there, and everywhere. Miss Tompkins is a part and privy of the project I'm involved in." Patch nodded. "You managed to hide from the big boys. Ray told me you might have been retrograded." "How were you told about me?" "One of my people said you were looking for Ray." "Okay, how do you know about retrograde?" "Your life has been fully explained to us," said Maddock, and Tompkins nodded. "Are you intel?" asked Patch. "No, I am not." Patch stroked his chin. "Where is Ray Meinkewitz?" Maddock adjusted his sunglasses in the bright sunshine. "I was with Ray 3 weeks ago in December." "Where is he now?" "I'm not sure." "What?" Patch held his elbow. "Was he all right?" "He was with me," said Maddock. Tompkins watched Patch as Maddock spoke. Patch's own image and the observatory were reflected in Maddock's sunglasses. "What happened?" "My people learned that FBI agents were on the way. Ray got out by the skin of his teeth. I heard Clyde Tolson and the FBI were involved in this operation." Patch could not yet trust him. "Why were they after Ray?" Maddock crossed his arms. "Somehow, and I don't know how, because we have extremely tight security, got back to the powers to be that Ray was with us. Those same government people that knew that Ray helped you escape in the fall of '63. Later that autumn, he went back to Barton College, late in October 1963. He made attempts to find you, but he had no luck. A trusted member of Congress alerted me. We met Ray at a private airport near Baltimore and flew him to a safe destination." "Who is we?" Maddock sighed and shrugged his shoulders. Again the smile. "No comment." "I thought so. Let me cut to the chase. Are you with the good guys?" Tompkins' eyes brightened with that remark. "Both Ray and I have taken a stance about what happened in Dallas. We don't believe the Warren Commission investigated anything. They were set up by Johnson and others to assure the public that Oswald did it." "Oswald's gathering intel sunk him into the plot," said Patch. "The Warren Commission report was public. The Warren Commission report has been public for over 2 years, correct?" "Exactly right. We've developed a strategy about the president's assassination." "Well, what do you want from me, Maddock? And why the hell are we on the top of Mount Wilson? Come on." "The air is nicer when the air is cleaner than below," said Tompkins, lips smiling. Patch somewhat returned the infectious smile as Maddock gazed through the distant smog and the faraway city buildings to the southwest. "All the intelligence agencies know you were in Dallas." "Of course they do. Sherry and I saw many of these creeps in Dallas and in Dealey Plaza." "Were you retrograded back here?" "Yes, but there was an engineer from the colony with me." Tompkins stared at Maddock. Maddock's bristly brows rose up over his sunglasses. "Ray was right when he said somehow you got back here. Who is this engineer?" "A John Palakis, and he hates my guts. He knows the whole retrograde thing, and he's aligned with the national security state of the future." "How did he get involved?" "He's an engineer. He was trapped with me, and now he's on the loose." "I'll alert my people," said Maddock. "I'm not back here because I want to be back here, believe me," said Patch, "and I could be ripped away at any time." Tompkins slightly tilted her head. "You didn't come back to change things?" asked Maddock. "No, the bubble is infinitesimal as it surrounds me. We know precious little about how these bubbles break away or travel from the lowest dimensional points. Outside our universe is not measurable or even exists. The bubbles allow travel outside the time area in an area that shouldn't exist," said Maddock. "You talk like you know Ray on a personal basis," said Patch. "I do." "You want to join us?" asked Maddock. Tompkins, although a smart-looking woman, annoyed Patch the way she stared at him. Patch produced a grunt laugh. "Join you? I don't even know what I'm joining." "We have one standing order, to find Ray, which I can see you want to do as well." "Who is we?" "I'll tell you once you're aboard the project." Patch tilted his head back. "I've learned never to trust anything the intelligence boys tell me." "I'm not intel." "Oh, you could be setting me up." True, what I represent, and those like me represent, involves solving the assassination of Kennedy. Oh, here we go. I'm not going back to prevent... That's not it, Patch, said Tompkins. I'm here to find Ray. Kennedy's been dead over 3 years, said Patch. I live in a future time where the national security state controls America. There is no USA. If I could somehow take them down, I would. How far in the future? She asked. 2047. They took it all, didn't they? Asked Maddock. That's very disconcerting. We all live in a colony in Canada. The United States as we know it simply doesn't exist. Maddock took 2 steps forward toward the overlook, his arms still crossed as he stared into the basin for almost a minute. I want you to come on board with us, Patch. Tompkins nodded with the same lip smile. What? Why? You mentioned the national security state. You're not going to stop that behemoth in the future. Well, I understand that. We'll stay in the colony if I ever get dragged back. Patch again wondered why Tompkins kept looking at him. Whether you do or don't get back, the NSS must be stopped sooner rather than later. Well, that part I agree with, said Patch, raising his index finger. Maddock put his hand on Patch's shoulder. Captain Kincaid, let me reiterate. Control by the intelligence agencies must stop now. I feel like Lee Oswald. Why? About to be used for Intel's own purpose. We're quite certain that Oswald was a patsy, said Tompkins. He was. I saw him on the first floor of that building, in the lunchroom. Maddock nodded as Patch spoke. That's why we need to talk to you at the base. It's secure. The base? What base? I can get you there securely and very quickly. Patch knew Maddock was right. In the future, the NSS was impossible to topple. Stopping them now would justify his being back here. He looked down the trail. I don't see your car, Mr. Maddock. It's not here. Look, Maddock, it's a matter of trusting you, and I don't. Simply because you haven't given me enough information. You could hold me prisoner. And what can you do? You're one guy. Patch, if I friggin' wanted to capture you, I'd show up here with a security team instead of the charming Miss Tompkins. I wouldn't be wasting my time trying to convince you. Stopping the intelligence agencies makes sense, but you're the most important witness alive. I don't understand. Maddock pulled out a blue box the size of a couple of cigarette packs, embedded with perforated plastic for a speaker and a voice piece. Patch counted 13 raised red buttons. I'm going to place a call to the mobile operator. I'll do that via the long line's trunk. What does that mean? I'll explain the blue box later. Ray Meinkewitz developed this device. Patch heard a cheap noise. 2,600 cycles, said Tompkins as Maddock pushed a silver button on top that emitted a high-pitched beep, then soft white noise. The long line trunk. Patch folded his hands over his chest. Amazing. Maddock pressed a button designated KP in the lower left. KP 192, start. Complicated, said Patch. A clunk was followed by another cheep. The overseas sender, said Tompkins. We're also on microwave. I'll go to the phone company's satellite. Doesn't sound as good, but it's easy to work with. Now back here. Then his voice deepened and he enunciated a command. This is Maddox. Implement Delta 7. Patch furrowed his brow. Less than a minute later, helicopter blades in the blue sky produced a choppy windstorm, and a clear, bubbled civilian helicopter rose like a dragon over the pines behind the observatory lot. Patch drew his gun. Put away the gun, Patch. Who are they? Men under my control and loyal to this project. And let me tell you something else. What's waiting for you at the entrance to the toll road if you drive down the mountain, 3 unmarked cars at the mountain road entrance. I didn't see anything when I was coming up here. We spotted them, Patch, said Tompkins. Well, thank you. You're welcome, she replied. Roselli had someone call a contact in Chicago about finding Ray. We have a few embedded people in the FBI. One is Bill Summers, not his real name. The FBI is wiretapping Roselli. That's how we got Salisbury's name back to Chicago and then to Roselli so quick. Salisbury was just a buffer in the case in case you were being followed. Salisbury was just a buffer in case you were being followed, which appears very likely that you were. Patch watched the helicopter land in the lower sandy parking lot, stirring the dirt and whipping the pine branches. Mount Wilson is the second buffer. They don't know why you're up here, but they are waiting for you to drive down that toll road, Patch. What are you going to do? Take them out? Asked Patch. We're going to do nothing. Taking them out would alert them that you had an ulterior motive to be up here. Okay, but I still don't know who you are and who you guys were with. I'm Commander Phineas Beauregard. Commander Beauregard? That name sounds familiar. Wait, Patch squinted. You went to MIT with Meinkewitz. Very good. Ray is one of my oldest and closest friends. The Intel boys figured that out. That's why they showed up at Hughes. Hughes Air Force Base? You're the commander of Hughes? Yes, Captain. And Miss Tompkins is indeed Lieutenant Natalie Tompkins, U.S. Air Force, and has worked with special ops teams. She stays in the shadows. My alter ego is Elton Maddock. I can have you at the base in the Mojave in a half an hour. Sir, I understand. You or Salisbury could have just taken me in. You wouldn't have gone through this helicopter show. What about my car? Leave it. He stepped closer. What do you say, Patch? Will you join us? Patch stuffed his gun behind his belt. What's Ray's wife's name? The commander's mouth remained open for several seconds. What are you going to do? Shoot me if I don't answer? Yes. Ray's wife is named Lynn. What's Ray's favorite meal? Fish and chips. Patch exhaled and then smiled. Good, I didn't want to shoot you anyways, Commander. And you, Miss Tompkins, are a woman. Yes, I am, she said with a slight giggle. He handed the gun to Beauregard. What are you going to do about the unmarked cars? Nothing. They'll go insane trying to find you. We'll talk when we get to the base. I know I'm trapped here in this time unless retrograde takes me. I'll work with you if you agree to prioritize finding Ray and taking down the behemoth. Then he laughed. I have no other option, Commander, do I? No, Patch, you don't, said Beauregard as he squeezed Patch's hand. Patch shook Tompkins's smooth hand. Then he descended down the well-worn trail. The chopper blades produced a whirlwind as Tompkins maneuvered her long legs upward and through the door. Then Patch crawled into the helicopter opening, followed by Beauregard. Patch nodded at the pilot, a crew-cut man with a headset. A soldier in military fatigues with a rifle at the ready sat in back. This is Colonel Biggs, said Beauregard from the front, nodding to the pilot. My right-hand man. Biggs saluted Patch. Colonel, said Patch, saluting back. Captain Kincaid? And Lieutenant Prescott, the head of my security detail. The dark-haired Prescott had a sloping forehead and smiled at Patch. Welcome aboard, Captain. Both men saluted. Lieutenant Beauregard settled in front and pointed his index finger at Biggs. In seconds, they rose above the observatory and the mountain itself. Beauregard was on a radio channel and mentioned Peleus in his description as Patch gave it to him. Tompkins caught glimpses of Patch as the craft zoomed along the scrub brush mountains. With the high desert to the north and more mountain peaks to the east dragged the smog toward residential communities near Palm Springs and the surrounding mountains. Biggs veered left and then on a course north toward the Mojave. Patch twisted back toward the extended rocky ledges to Mount Wilson and the receding, smoggy LA basin. He wondered about Peleus's whereabouts and if he had contacted the FBI. Then he studied the broad-shouldered Beauregard and questioned what role he played in this project. Lieutenant Tompkins smiled and looked out the chopper's glass bubble.